It's the real news. I'm Aaron Mate, continuing with Dr. Basem Naim, the former health minister of Gaza, who took part in the organizing for the Great March of Return. So, Dr. Naim, before the break, we were talking about this ceremony that coincided with the protests in Gaza today. In Jerusalem, the U.S. opening up its embassy there, fulfilling Trump's pledge to move the embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv. Your thoughts on that ceremony, very symbolic and important for Palestinians, coinciding with the protests and the killings today?
Really, it is a very sad day for us. First, the move of the embassy coincide with the Palestinian Nakba, the catastrophe, where hundreds of thousands of Palestinians displaced from their homes, villages, and cities outside of Palestine or partially inside other parts of Palestine, the Gaza Strip and the West Banks. Second, according to the UN resolutions which recognized Israel and accepted Israel as a member state of the United Nations, this recognition and acceptance was bound to two other conditions. First, the foundation of another state, the Palestinian state or Arab state. Second, to allow Palestinians to return to their homes. Therefore, the recognition of Israel as an independent state and a member state in the United Nations is bound or related immediately to the foundation of another state, which is the Palestinian state. Unfortunately, the international community, led by the United States, failed until today to give the Palestinians their rights of their own independent sovereign state and to allow the Palestinians or help the Palestinians to return back to their villages and cities. Therefore, it is a sad day. Second, the United States played along the last 25 years the role of a broker between the Palestinians and Israelis. And we have seen along the last 25 years that United States was always was not a neutral broker between the two parties. Sometimes we have the feeling that we are negotiating not only with the Israelis, we are negotiating with the Israelis and with the Americans as one party. But especially with the administration of the new administration in the United States, the administration of Trump, it becomes crystal clear that we cannot talk anymore talking about a broker between the two parties. The United States cannot anymore be part of this peace process or negotiation process. Trump tried to take from the table the main three topics: Jerusalem, the refugees, and the borders, including settlements. Jerusalem, he has recognized as the capital of the eternal capital of the state of Israel. Refugees, he decided suddenly to cut all the financial support for the UNRWA, which is the UN agency responsible for protecting and helping the Palestinian refugees in the diaspora and inside Gaza Strip and the West Bank. And finally, the borders and the settlements. When you appoint an ambassador of the United States in Israel, who is a settler, who have a house in one of the settlements, who was the chairman or supported financially one of those terror groups or terror gangs, the settlers who attacked Palestinians day and night, I think we are talking really about a very sad day, especially as I said, after 70 years, we have expected the international community, the free world, especially the United States as a leader of this free world, to help us to get our fundamental rights of independence, freedom, and sovereignty, and dignified and decent life.
Dr. Naim, the estimates that I've seen for the crowd today in Gaza taking part in the Great March of Return is something like up to 40,000 people, which is a large number. And to me, it's all the more astounding given that, for the last 6 weeks, every single week when Palestinians have turned out, Israeli forces have opened fire, killing unarmed protesters. Were you surprised by this turnout? What did it take to mobilize so many people? And what do you think is the response now? Now that today on this mobilization, the response from Israel has been so brutal, so merciless.
Yeah, first to correct something, I think our assessment that we are not talking about 40,000, at least we are talking about 80 to 100,000, because when you are in the field, you see that people are coming and leaving. It is not a fixed number. Therefore, we are talking about at least 80 to 100,000 people in the different areas where the people collecting near the fence. I think Palestinians have a clear decision, and they are aware of what they are doing. First, they have nothing to lose. If you live in Gaza, no water, no electricity, no medicine, poverty, unemployment, sea is spoiled, everything is, you are living in a real prison. Palestinians have a clear and conscious decision to go for these peaceful protests despite of the very high price they are paying every week. Again, because of the very disastrous situation here in Gaza, the people have nothing to lose. As I said, 95% of water is unsuitable for human being, and no access to the outside world, no electricity, sewage water is pumped into the sea, unemployment, poverty. 85% of people are depending on external food aid. Therefore, they have nothing to lose. Second, I think Palestinians have given the international community, the region, all the UN agencies, all the time to help us to get our crucial fundamental rights of return, of independence, of freedom. What we have after 70 years is zero, a big zero. Therefore, Palestinians have decided to take the initiative by their own hand and to go to protest peacefully against the occupation.
Dr. Naim, what do you want from the international community? We've seen protests today in Turkey in solidarity with Palestinians. What are you asking for from people who want to defend Palestinian rights around the world?
First, to stop this massacre immediately, because it is not acceptable to allow Israel to continue behaving as a state above the law, as a rogue state, to kill innocent peaceful protesters simply because it is Israel. And because it is protected from the United States, and the United States, as I said, used at least 72 to 73 times veto in the Security Council to protect Israel from being punished by the international community. Second, to lift immediately and unconditionally this immoral and illegal siege on the Gaza Strip. It is unacceptable anymore to die in silence. It is unacceptable anymore to behave with the Gazans and the Gaza Strip as an animal farm. Finally, I think Palestinians have the right to have their own state, independent, sovereign state, to their right of return, but at least immediately to stop this massacre, to take those criminals to ICC, and to lift the siege immediately and unconditionally.
And Dr. Naim, finally, Tuesday is the final day of the Great March of Return. It's being held on the day that commemorates the Nakba, which you mentioned earlier, the day that marks the expulsion of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from their homes. Do you expect Palestinians in Gaza to turn out again on Tuesday after such a horrific day today, so many losing their lives?
I am sure they will return back to the fence and protest against the marches, against the occupation, to call for their freedom, for dignity, and for lifting the siege immediately and unconditionally. Finally, by the way, the Higher Committee for a Great March of Return and lifting the siege at 6:30 p.m. Gaza time, they announced that the Great Return March will continue, and the next peak is the 5th of June, which is the day where the Arabic armies in 67 were defeated, what we call the Naksa. And at that time, Gaza Strip and the West Bank was occupied by the Israeli occupation 50 years ago. Therefore, I think Gazans and Palestinians will continue to protest, especially Gazans, and this very high price will not deter them from continuing calling for their freedom and dignity and lifting the siege, as I said, immediately and unconditionally.
Dr. Basem Naim, thank you.
Please, you are welcome.
And thank you for joining us on The Real News.